I don't really get the idea of only running, 16 or 18 miles as a long run. Hello and welcome back. My name's James, aka Run Spoon Run, and today I wanted to run you through the training plan I used that got me to 2:45 at Manchester earlier this year. I've just started marathon training again for Frankfurt Marathon in October, and I'll be running a pretty similar training plan for that. I'll be doing weekly vlogs, but I thought before that it might be useful to go through a complete training plan to see kind of how I go about marathon training and exactly how it's planned to progress through the weeks. So to give you a bit of background, in the autumn of last year I took a break from marathons, decided to try and concentrate on my 10k and half marathon times. I still ran a fairly high mileage program with a couple of 100-mile weeks, and that worked really well. I managed to get my half marathon time down to 1:20 at the Oxford Half. I also managed to take nearly 2 minutes off my 10k time at the Worcester 10k, running 36:12. So all in all, it was a really solid block of training. After that, I took a week off and then tried to sort of do a mini target of the Telford 10k before marathon training proper started. Training for that didn't go quite so well. It was a bit disrupted. I had a bit of illness and didn't just quite get back into things as quick as I'd hoped. Although I was probably due a rest, so it probably didn't hurt. In the end, the Telford 10k ended up getting cancelled. Little did I know that would become a feature of this marathon training block. My original plan was to run the Telford 10k, then have an easy week. So I figured I was already in decent shape. I was rested because I tapered a little bit for the Telford 10k. So I launched straight into marathon training. So to basically explain my plan, it's based heavily off the Fitzner and Douglas Advanced Marathoning book, which I've used for previous marathons to great effect. However, I modified it slightly. I took some of the sessions that were made famous by Steve Way from Bournemouth Athletic Club. They're mainly kind of sandwich sessions where you do blocks of marathon pace with quite often something a bit faster in the middle. I felt they were going to be a lot more useful to me than the long lactate threshold runs that Fitzinger prescribes in his training plans. I also used some of the training sessions from NAS Elite, which is a pro training group in northern Arizona in America. They publish all their running kind of on the Final Surge platform and also allow you to buy training plans that are basically lifted directly from what their pro runners run. And I really thought that some of those sessions were going to help me in improving as much as possible. The basic structure of most weeks was roughly the same. It would always start with a very easy Monday recovery day, which gave me a chance to get over the long run from the previous day and just ease into the week gently. That would be normally 2 runs, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, of between 5 and 7.5 miles each. Tuesdays were another easy day, this time split up into a 10 to 12 mile easy run in the morning. That's done at still a relatively easy pace, but faster than recovery runs. To give you a rough ballpark, I probably did my recovery runs about 2 minutes a mile faster than marathon pace, and my easy runs were about a minute a mile faster. So still well within the comfortable range, but a bit more aerobically challenging than a basic recovery run. I'd then follow those Tuesday 10 mile to 12 miles up with another 5 mile recovery run in the afternoon. Wednesday was my main session day. I'd run a good warm-up and then some kind of session, often at marathon pace or lactate threshold pace. Did the odd bit of faster work, but not too much, as I think ultimately for marathons, marathon pace and lactate threshold work is sort of where you get your most bang for buck. They would often end up being 12, 14, I think at one point even up to 18 miles. So that was still a really big, solid session. Thursday was then another easy run, very similar to Tuesday. Again, that allowed me to get over my Wednesday session and still get plenty of miles on the legs. And again, there'd be a recovery run on the afternoon as well. Friday would then be my medium long run day. So that's anything up to 15, 16 miles. Slightly different to the easy run in that I'd try and run it a bit faster. looking to be around marathon pace plus 10%, as the great Renato Caneva sort of recommends. So that would again be a really great stimulus. It gets the legs used to running at a slightly faster pace on tired legs. And I really do think the medium long runs from the Fitzinger plans are a key to really performing well, especially towards the end of a marathon. Saturday would be another easy day, again, probably 10 miles, occasionally 11 or 12, depending on how I'm feeling. But I keep that as just a single run day to give me a little bit of extra recovery, ready for the long run on Sunday. My Sunday long runs started out at 20 miles and sort of built from there. I'm a big believer in getting in lots of miles in your long run. I don't really get the idea of only running, 16 or 18 miles. So I'd go up to 24 miles on the long run. And I also, this cycle more than ever, introduce sessions into the long runs. So by sessions, it would vary. It began with sort of lighter stuff, like in a 20-mile long run, I do 2-minute surges at the start of every mile, just as a way of getting some speed into the legs and also getting your legs used to recovering from faster and then slower running. That's a really good lactate stimulus. I'd also do sections at marathon pace, so again that would start with maybe a mile on and a mile off at marathon pace, just giving you a little bit of time at marathon pace and making that long run just a bit more challenging. And that then went all the way up to 4 miles at lactate threshold, then 10 miles, then another 4 miles at lactate threshold, with some warm up and warm down either side. That was really tough, especially that second 4 miles at lactate threshold after you'd already ran, a good 16, 18 miles. The other tough one was a 3 by 4 miles at marathon pace, broken up with a mile of slightly easier running. Originally that had planned to be a 13-mile non-stop as part of a half marathon, but much like the snow disrupted my Telford plans at the beginning, snow turned out to be a major factor at the later end of the training plan as well. So let's get into some more detail of the specific training I was doing. In week 1, I got up to 82.5 miles. That week was disrupted by snow, unfortunately, so it was a lot of easy running. I managed to create some suitable shoes by screwing sheet metal screws into the bottom of some old trainers. That worked surprisingly well for getting good grip on ice and snow, but it did mean that most of my runs were fairly slow compared to where I wanted them to be. However, by the end of the week the snow had melted and I was able to get in a couple of decent quality runs, ending in a 20-mile long run at 6:53 minute mile pace, which sort of came out of nowhere in many respects. I wasn't expecting to be able to go quite that fast on a long run quite so soon, but it definitely bode well for the rest of marathon training. The second week, and indeed these next few weeks, was a case of building up the mileage, so I got up to 92.7 miles this week. Introduced my first session, which was a lactate threshold session up at the track, where I did basically 3 times 10 minutes at around lactate threshold pace. I was really pleased with this. I hit 6 minutes a mile, which was right on what the Daniels calculator gives us lactate threshold based off my PBs at the time. The rest was all easy and steady running. I had a nice long run at the end of the week, got up to 22 miles, still managing to stay under 7 minutes a mile for the whole average. So again, another solid long run, getting those miles in, building up that base. In the third week, I hit my first 100-mile week of this training block, hit 103 miles. My session that week was another track session. I was taking advantage of the track being available during the week as the schools were off on the Christmas holidays. That session consisted of 12 minutes at lactate threshold, then 5 by 2 minutes at around 5k pace, and again another 12 minutes at lactate threshold. Again, I managed to hit the paces reasonably well, even though it was quite a wet, windy day, and I was really happy with that. The Sunday long run was a bit different this week. I planned to run the Gloucester 10 miler as sort of a marathon pace session. It seemed to work quite well in terms of its positioning within the programme, and I thought it would be a good early start to get some marathon pace in the legs and see how 10 miles at that pace felt. Unfortunately, the organisers described it as a flat, fast race, but it really was anything but. There was quite a few little hills, and I'm really not a big fan of hills. Despite that, I managed to average, I think, 6:20 a mile for that race, so not too far off the 6:17 goal pace I had. And with the hills factored in, I was pretty pleased with that. I also made sure I treated it as a long run, so I ran a good 6-mile warm-up before the race and a few miles afterwards to make sure I was still getting in the long run mileage that I wanted to be. The fourth week was a bit of a recovery week, dropping back to 70 miles a week. It was also the week where the planned Telford 10k that was cancelled at the start of the training cycle was rescheduled, so I planned to sort of have a small taper go for that and sort of have a good go at it and see what kind of 10k shape I was in. Because I was doing the 10k, I had a slightly easier session that week of just 3 by 15 minutes at marathon pace on the Wednesday. However, I have to be honest, although I managed to roughly hit what I wanted marathon pace to be, the effort level on that session was definitely feeling a lot harder than marathon pace should. It was probably closer to a lactate threshold in terms of effort levels. But nonetheless, it was early days in the plan. And when you're running high mileage, you have to expect that the odd session doesn't go perfectly. You've just got to remember that if you're not hitting the paces you want to be doing, as long as you're working hard, it's still going to be having a positive training effect on you. So on the Sunday, I had the Telford 10k. I arrived there in plenty of time and happily ran off to run a warm-up around the woods that the course takes place in. Unfortunately, I somehow managed to get lost during my warm-up. I couldn't for the life of me work out where I'd turned off or what had gone wrong. And it ended up that I was sprinting for the start line as the race was being counted down. So that wasn't the ideal prep. My heart rate was already well up into 10k range before I'd even run past the start line. Luckily, the Telford 10k split up into an A and a B race. So although I was right at the back of the pack, most of the runners were still pretty fast. Although I had to work my way in and out of people, it wasn't quite as bad as it would have been if you were starting at the back of a big mass participation race. I quickly resigned myself to not being able to run a PB that day, even though I think I probably was in PB shape at the time, and instead settled to run a hard tempo run. So I managed to average around 6 minutes a mile for the whole 6 miles. So although it wasn't the race I'd hoped it to be, it was still at least a good workout. After the Telford 10k, it was time to launch into a really heavy block of training. The plan was to hit 4 weeks all over 100 miles before tapering down for the Worthing half marathon, which is a half marathon I've done a few times before my spring marathon. That 4-week block went really, really well. I hit mileages of 106, 105, 115 and then 111 miles a week. I managed to put in some really solid sessions, including a lactate threshold descender, going 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes and 5 minutes of lactate threshold. I also ran at the end of a 100-mile week the Linda Franks 5-miler, where I set a big 5-mile PB, finishing in 29:06. So averaging 5:50 minutes a mile, which I was really happy with, as I say, at the end of a 100-mile week, and indeed my second 100-mile week. I also did some pyramid sessions. I did 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes and 1 minute, up and down 3 times, all aiming for sort of lactate threshold or faster. And then I did a descender of 10 times 5 minutes, starting out with 5 minutes at marathon pace and gradually speeding up until you get to 5 minutes at lactate threshold pace or faster. Along with those sessions, I was still plugging in the 10-mile easy runs, the 5-mile recovery runs in the evenings, and the nice big medium long runs on the Fridays, and also getting in some solid long runs. After a couple of 22 and 20-mile long runs, I started these sessions. So my first session long run was 21.5 miles with 10 miles towards the end, featuring 2-minute surges at the start of each mile. And then the next week I did a big 24-mile long run, which featured 10 lots of 1 mile at marathon pace and then 1 mile at easy, steady pace. Unfortunately, at the end of that run, in an effort to swerve to avoid a dog that had run out in front of me, I managed to tweak my ankle. I think I landed on it slightly strangely, and that kind of tweaked my Achilles, which then caused my ankle to lock up. This was a major worry, as it was sort of not really painful to run on, but definitely you could feel it when you were running. And I was concerned that running on it too much was going to cause major issues. Thankfully, I had the opportunity to see a physio in that week afterwards. And after a few minutes of massage, she managed to completely release the locked up ankle, and it was as if by magic it felt like normal again. So that week was rather disrupted because I took things super easy until I got the chance to see the physio. I just did 5 miles on the Monday, a 7.5 mile easy run on the Tuesday, and then on the Wednesday, to avoid risking any further damage, I just took the entire day off. It wasn't easy making that decision. I'm a big believer in kind of sticking to your plan. And I didn't like the idea of missing a day, but at the same time I was really worried that I was going to do more damage and, completely ruin my entire training cycle. Thankfully, after the physio had worked her magic, I was feeling a lot better. I did a 10-mile easy run on the Friday just to test out that distance was still going to be okay, and then I headed into the weekend looking forward to putting in a good performance at the Worthing half. Unfortunately, that weekend was dreadful weather-wise. It was really, really windy. The wind between miles 7 and 10 was absolutely horrendous. But I nonetheless managed to run a really well-measured race. I stuck exactly to my plan of hitting 6 minutes a mile up until the 7 mile mark, where we turned out onto the seafront and hit the wind. It was then just a case of clinging on for dear life for those 3 miles. Unfortunately, I didn't have many people to work with, but I managed to avoid losing too much time. I think I dropped back to about 6:20 minutes a mile. And then once we hit the turnaround point at 10 miles, I was able to put the foot down again. All those miles over the last 4 weeks really helped at that point because my legs just felt so strong. And I managed to motor up to 5:50 minutes a mile, if not faster. Put in a really good sprint finish and finished in 1:18.53. I'm pretty sure if the weather had been better, I'd have easily been around 1:18. And that was exactly the time I was looking for to show me that 2:45 might be possible at Manchester. After Worthing, it was then time for the final 5-week block of heavy training before the taper started to kick in. So that was 5 weeks, all above 100 miles a week. I did 112 miles in the first week, getting up to 121 miles, then dropping back to 105, then another 123 mile week, and then finally 104 miles. Training during this period was disrupted a little bit by the snow, unfortunately. We had 2 lots, both timed perfectly to cancel both my planned half marathons. I was originally going to run the Bath half marathon as a 13-mile marathon pace training session. That was cancelled a few days beforehand, so I quickly booked a place at Reading who had opened up spots specifically for the people that had missed out at Bath. And then what do you know, just before the Reading half marathon was due to go ahead, snow also cancelled that. So for those 2 weeks, I ended up spending a lot of time on the treadmill, including 2 22-mile long runs featuring blocks at marathon pace. These were really mind-numbing, really tough to get through. But at the same time, I think it did help with my mental strength. The mental aspect of marathon running, I think, is often overlooked. And in fact, it's probably something I'll go into more detail in a future video. But for sure, the hours grinding away on the treadmill definitely helped when times were starting to get tough during Manchester. Anyway, despite the snow hiccups, I still managed to, as I say, get lots of mileage in. This block introduced some of the really big sessions that I'd taken from the NAS and BAC plans. So I did sessions like 20 times a kilometre at half marathon pace on the track. That again was quite mind-numbing, a whole lot of laps on the track, but a really fantastic training session that I think really helped me a lot. I also did some of the big BAC sandwich sessions. So that featured 25 to 30 minutes of marathon pace running, followed by a block of either 4x5 or 5x4 minutes trying to hit lactate threshold pace. And then that was followed up by another 25 to 30 minutes of marathon pace. Those sessions are great for getting used to running at marathon pace. The lactate threshold bits in the middle really tire your legs out, which means that second marathon pace block becomes much tougher, and it's really fantastic practice for running fast on tired legs. Training didn't always go completely perfectly during this block. There were a couple of sessions where I was feeling quite tired, as you might imagine, running quite so many miles. So on one of them, which was originally planned to be a progression starting at 24 minutes at marathon pace, then dropping down to 18, 12, 8, 6, gradually speeding up paces. I ended up cutting that one short after a 24 minute and an 18 minutes pace block, simply because I was feeling exhausted. I was struggling to complete just those beginning bits, and I realised there was little point kind of running myself into the ground to complete that session. You have to look at the overall goal. More important to me that week was completing the full week of training rather than running myself into the ground for an extra few minutes running fast, which would then have set me back and maybe meant I couldn't complete all the runs I had planned for the rest of the week. After all that hard work, which in the end came to 10 weeks averaging over 100 miles a week, it was then time for the taper. The taper is really important in a marathon because there's no point arriving at race day really fit but so tired that you can't run your best in the marathon itself. I tend to follow a fairly standard 3-week marathon taper although this time around I still ran one final really big session on the first Wednesday of the taper, so about 2.5 weeks out from race day. That was the final BAC session of 30 minutes at marathon pace, 4 by 5 minutes at lactate threshold, and then another 30 minutes at marathon pace. That session went fantastically well. I was really daunted by it when I started, but it went really well. I managed to hit the paces I wanted to hit, and indeed the entire run ended up being 18 miles at 6:30 minutes a mile. So that was a massive confidence booster to be able to run 18 miles, not all that far off my planned marathon pace, and come out of it at the end still alive. After that, things gradually wound down. I wound down my long runs. Originally that week I planned to run a 17-mile long run, but I had a bit of a kind of hip niggle develop towards the early start parts of that run, so I decided rather than risk any injuries, I'd cut that short, knowing I'd already put in an 18-miler on the Wednesday anyway, and realistically at that stage there was a lot more to be lost than to be gained by another 17 miles. The taper then wound down even more. So 2 weeks out I just did 60 miles. I did a lighter session of 10 minutes at marathon pace, followed by 8 by 2 minutes at 5k pace. That's just a nice little sharpener that gives you another little bit at marathon pace, and then some faster 5k work to get your legs turning over and just remind them that they need to be still going fast every so often. That week it was just a 13-miler for the long run, as you let the legs prepare for the task ahead. In the final week, things really wound down. I just did a 5 and an 8-miler on the Monday and Tuesday. Then on the Wednesday I did my final little sharpener session. That was just a 5k on the track at planned marathon pace. Obviously that's not going to do much fitness wise for you, but it's just a little practice. Get your legs used to moving at that kind of pace. And it's also hopefully a confidence booster, because ideally that will go well and that pace will feel easy and it will give you a bit of confidence going into the marathon. It doesn't always work that way. Before now I've done a similar kind of session like that and it's felt way too tough. So you can't read too much into it, but thankfully this time around it went well and gave me plenty of confidence. I then took the Thursday off, which has become a sort of tradition after last year. I ended up having to take the Thursday before my marathon off for sort of non-running reasons, but it seemed to work quite nicely, so I've kept that in now as a day off to let your legs completely recover. It was then just a case of a 5-miler and a 3-miler on the Friday and Saturday to keep the legs turning over. Did a few strides on the Saturday, again just to wake the legs up, remind them what running fast feels like, and then it was time for race day. As I've mentioned before, the race went fantastically well. We had perfect weather, very little wind, nice cool conditions. I ended up running my best pace marathon ever. I think my slowest mile was only 6 or 7 seconds slower than the overall goal pace. I ended up running 2:45.06. Unfortunately, that's 7 seconds slower than I was hoping for. And that did mean I missed out on the planned championship goal time, which would allow me to enter the London Marathon as a championship entrant. Nonetheless, though, I was over the moon. It was a huge chunk off my PB, and it just showed how well that training plan had gone, taking me from a 2:57 marathon PB to 2:45. As I say, this future Frankfurt block is going to be very similar. I'll maybe go into a bit more detail in my next video, which will be my first week recap of training. But as I say, very little will have changed between that one and this one I've just been talking about. So yeah, that's how I go about marathon training. As you can see, there's a heavy emphasis on mileage and also some quality sessions at lactate threshold and marathon pace. If you have any questions, please stick them in the comments below. If you like this video, please remember to subscribe. I'd love you to follow me along on my journey, and as I say, I'll be posting weekly vlogs to show how my training's been going through the weeks, leading all the way up to Frankfurt in October. Cheers!